Pursuant to House Rule 10.01, this meeting of the Housing, Finance, and Policy Committee will come to order. The clerk will take the roll.
Hausman,
Present.
Howard,
Present.
Tice,
Present.
McBadge,
Present.
Bliss,
Present.
Gomez,
Present.
Hassan, Heinrich,
Present.
Herr,
Present.
Jurgens,
Present.
Olson,
Present.
Farr,
Present.
and Ryer.
Present.
Madam Chair, we do have a quorum.
Thank you. The next order of business is approval of the minutes from Tuesday, February 9. Representative Howard, have you had a chance to review the minutes?
I have, so moved.
Representative Howard moves approval of the minutes. Any discussion? If not, you can unmute yourselves. This one can be a voice vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion prevails and the minutes are approved. We have a number of speakers today. The first one, it sort of sets the tone for the Urdahl bill to follow. But first of all, we're joined by Scott McMahon, Executive Director of the Greater Minnesota Partnership. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself for the record.
Good morning, Chair Hausman. My name is Scott McMahon. I'm a lobbyist with the firm Flaherty & Hood, and I'm here today on behalf of two of our clients. As you indicated, I am the Executive Director for the Greater Minnesota Partnership, but I'm also here representing the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities. The coalition represents more than 100 cities outside of the 7-county metro area on a wide array of issues, ranging from taxation to transportation, wastewater, and economic development, which includes housing. I want to thank you for the opportunity to present to the committee the perspective from Greater Minnesota on issues regarding housing access, development, and its connection to economic development in our area. This is a critical issue in Greater Minnesota, so we're thankful for this opportunity. I also want to thank your staff for their tremendous work. Your jobs are difficult enough during a normal legislative session, and now you have layered on top of that virtual legislating. Please know that all of us in the advocacy community are beyond grateful for the work that all of you are doing. If there is one message I want to leave with the committee today, it is this: Minnesota as a whole faces challenges involving a wide spectrum of issues on housing. As you heard at previous hearings, this is true throughout the Twin Cities, and I, along with others, are here today to give you the same message regarding Greater Minnesota. But the issues and challenges differ from region to region and community to community. Where you have heard that affordable housing is one of the most significant issues in the metro area, in Greater Minnesota, our biggest issue is economic failure in our housing market and an overall lack of available market rate or workforce housing. As a result of the differences between the housing needs in different regions of the state, when we address housing issues with statewide programs, the fix either addresses the problems in the metro, but fails to address the problems in Greater Minnesota, or it addresses the problems in Greater Minnesota, but fails to address the problems in the metro. As you look to make your policy and funding decisions this session, I encourage you to take on the challenge and work to address housing issues that are truly statewide with statewide programs, but more importantly, to address regional issues with regional, focused, and targeted solutions that are equitably distributed throughout the state. I'd now like to share with you our perspective of the housing challenges in Greater Minnesota by sharing with you some graphics that were included in the 2018 housing study from the Center for Rural Policy and Development. And hopefully you can see my screen share here. The first graphic here shows what is happening in Greater Minnesota, often in the single-family starter home market in the vast majority of our communities. In our housing market, the cost to build a new home is greater than what the house will appraise for after it is built. So if you think about buying a car, they always say when you drive off the lot, you just lost $1,000. We have the same situation here. If you can get a house built, as soon as you unlock your front door, you just lost money, except you've lost $30,000 or $50,000. Because of this, it is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to get private financing for new single-family workforce housing throughout Greater Minnesota. So unless a person has cash on hand to finance 100% of a new home, which no young worker does, we simply cannot get new starter homes built. The second graphic here shows how our markets fail to develop multifamily housing development. Often, the median rents demanded by our markets are anywhere from $200 to $500 less than what a developer needs for per unit rent to finance a project. As a result, we simply are not getting market rate workforce multifamily housing built in Greater Minnesota. And when we look at the state's affordable housing programs and how they might help address this issue, the individuals or families who are looking for the housing have too much income to qualify for housing built using the state's affordable housing programs. The final graphic I wanted to share with you is this last one here that looks at when we take an existing home that undergoes a substantial renovation. Think of this as taking a house built in the 1940s, last updated in the 1980s, being renovated for 2021 standards. The cost of a substandard house plus the renovation cost exceeds what the house will appraise for when completed. Again, making financing of these projects or the willingness of the homeowner to make the investment knowing they're going to lose funds all but impossible. All of these illustrations, what you see is how the housing market in Greater Minnesota, whether it is for single family or multifamily projects, owner occupied or rental, is simply broken. The development cost in every single one of these examples exceeds either the appraised value of the completed project or the rents needed to finance the project exceed the rental rate in the community. So what do these graphics actually mean for Greater Minnesota? Throughout our communities, the biggest challenge we face is developing market rate workforce housing. Or put another way, what we need to partner with the state and others on is finding ways, either through public policies or investments, to increase the production of our much needed workforce housing. Housing that is intended for teachers, healthcare workers, factory workers, and Main Street entrepreneurs. People looking to move into a house, but who cannot access the financing needed to build a new house or fix up an existing house because of the market failure I described before. In Greater Minnesota, we currently have thousands of job openings, jobs that are stable, pay good wages, and provide good benefits. But far too often employers can't fill the jobs because they can't find the people locally with the skills they need. In these cases, they have to recruit from outside of our communities for people to move into our communities to take the job. What do you think happens when appropriate housing isn't available within 50 or 75 miles? That potential employee will turn down the job. If this happens too often, the employer will have no choice but to expand their business elsewhere, or worse off, move the entire business to where they can find the workforce they need. When our communities lose a major employer, it can take a generation or longer for the community and the local economy to recover. When we ask employers the top barrier stopping them from recruiting the workers they need, it's not the wages offered or the lack of willingness of the person to live in a smaller rural community. The answers we get are a lack of housing and a lack of childcare. So while we face housing issues in Greater Minnesota, for us, it is not just simply a housing issue. It is an economic development issue, a community vitality issue, and these issues are significant not only for our community itself, but for the state as a whole. Thank you for this opportunity, and I'm happy to answer any questions members have.
Thank you, Mr. McMahon. Mr. Worth, do we have any questions?
Yes, Madam Chair. Representative Gomez has a question.
Representative Gomez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for that information, Mr. McMahon. I just was looking through the bill, and it only refers to rental housing in the bill, but you talked about the need to support workforce homeownership production, and so I'm just wondering if you can address that. Like, is this money available for homeownership production or just for rental?
We perhaps should wait until Representative Urdahl presents his bill. Mr. McMahon is just speaking to the broader issue at this point, I think. Mr. McMahon.
Yeah, I'm happy to address that question. I think you may in fact hear some of the answers to that question in the upcoming presentations, as well as from Representative Urdahl and the testifiers on the bill. So it might be best to hold off until we get through some of these other conversations first.
Okay, we can come back to that again, Representative Gomez.
Thank you.
Anyone else, Mr. Worth?
Yes, Madam Chair. Representative Howard has a question.
Representative Howard.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for the presentation, Mr. McMahon. You mentioned how our whole state faces housing challenges, but regionally they differ. And I imagine locally, local governments, their ability to respond differ as well. Could you speak to the needs of our cities or counties in Greater Minnesota and their challenges in supporting affordable housing? and if there might be a need for the state to support those local efforts through, local housing trust funds, et cetera, those kinds of solutions where the state can partner but yet allow the local governments to sort of lead with the regional solutions.
Mr. McMahon?
Chair Hausman and Representative Howard, we need to put all options on the table in Greater Minnesota. The flexibility that we can create with things like housing trust funds are part of the toolkit that we need. The reality is, as we get into the conversation about Representative Urdahl's bill, that's one of the tools that we need. It's not the only tool that we need. So I think any of the things that this committee and the state and our local governments can put forward to address different aspects of the housing crisis will help us tremendously. With regards to affordable housing in general, one of the things that you'll hear frequently if you talk to our cities, especially, our cities, not the regional centers, so not the Rochesters and St. Clouds and Mankato's and such, but in a lot of our other smaller cities across Greater Minnesota, we don't have as great a demand for new affordable housing construction, partially because we have, in a lot of instances, sufficient build out of income restricted housing. And the other reality is the existing housing stock throughout Greater Minnesota is relatively inexpensive to begin with. And so we have opportunities to get lower income folks into home ownership situations when those houses are available. At times they need some help with some of the with some of the upgrades and improvements to the property. But we don't see as much need for the affordable housing as we do on the workforce housing side of the equation.
Further questions, Mr. Worth? Oh, did you have a follow-up?
Madam Chair, no more questions at this time.
Okay. Thank you for your testimony. We'll see you back when we get to the bill. And now we have Chad Adams, who is from the Southwest Minnesota Housing Partnership. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself for the record.
Good morning, Chair Hausman and members of the committee. I'm Chad Adams, the CEO of the Southwest Minnesota Housing Partnership with offices in Slayton and Mankato, Minnesota. We'll also be speaking on the broader housing issues in Greater Minnesota before providing comments later on the workforce housing grant. I've been the CEO for the partnership for nearly 2 years, and I previously served in local government management as a city administrator manager for 20 years prior to this position, most recently as the city manager of Albert Lea, where I worked with a variety of stakeholders on a number of housing initiatives throughout Southeast Minnesota and in Albert Lea. Our partnership promotes and delivers a high quality comprehensive menu of housing services as a nonprofit community development corporation. And our goal is to support preservation, stability, and economic development across 30 counties in southwestern and south central Minnesota. So coupled with my experience in Southeast Minnesota, prior to this position, I've got a fairly good perspective on the needs in Greater Minnesota and the southern third of the state. This past fall, I was also elected as co-chair of the Homes for All Coalition. I'd like to share some perspective and a few highlights of the challenges in housing that we are facing in Greater Minnesota, but more so want to preserve some time to answer any questions you may have regarding the critical issues we are facing in housing. First, construction costs have escalated significantly in the last 10 years. Recently in Worthington, we constructed 2 new single-family homes, and based on the development and construction costs, our asking prices were $262,000 and $267,000 for a pretty general 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 2-car home, one being a split level and another slab on grade home. In many markets that we work in throughout the 30 counties we serve, we were able to set asking prices at half that cost 10 years ago. It's a significant challenge. We also see some challenges with appraisals for those very same homes. The starter homes are out of reach for incoming workforce, and a substantial gap exists between the starter homes and appraised value of the newly constructed homes. Therefore, families are unable to secure financing for new home purchases, such as those I just identified. We're also experiencing a construction trade shortage, which has been a challenge for us as a developer to receive competitive quotes and bids from general or subcontractors in many areas throughout Southwest and South Central Minnesota. We need more assistance or trade program development to really take care of this issue in Greater Minnesota. There continues to be a lack of housing availability and workforce development challenges as well too. Several communities seeing job growth have no housing options for their new employees that they're trying to attract to their communities. In just the past 2 months, we've connected with more than a handful of communities that are looking to add 50 to 200 jobs right now or in the next 2 years, many paying strong wages of $18 to $20 an hour with full-time benefits. They have very little to no housing available to recruit employees and have not been able to build housing needed on both short-term and long-term. Over the past couple of years, I've also discussed similar significant housing shortages and challenges with several dozens of communities beyond those I've just referenced. We have no easy solutions to meet their needs and are advocating to the state for more tools, resources, and partnerships beyond the already very strong partnerships that we get from communities. In the area of affordable housing, Minnesota has been suffering from an affordable housing shortage for many years, due in part to decades of disinvestment at the federal level, stagnant wages, and inconsistent state funding. The COVID-19 pandemic has only exacerbated housing instability for thousands of Minnesota households. The solutions are complex, but a safe, affordable, and accessible home is a necessary foundation if we want to have better education outcomes for our children, healthcare that has meaningful long-term benefits, and economic stability for our communities. The number of affordable housing projects over the years with Minnesota Housing support is becoming less viable due to funding and competitiveness for the state dollars. We've historically applied for a number of affordable housing development projects, whether it's through acquisition, rehab, or new construction. We simply have not been able to see as much success due to the competitiveness over the last several years. These tax credits and housing infrastructure bonds, for example, are essential to affordable housing development. As it relates to community partnerships, we've been experiencing a significant increase in communities partnering with us, whether it's in the form of land write-down, infrastructure assistance, tax increment financing, or tax abatement. However, in most communities, we need at least 2 or 3 of those substantial partnerships for product to be built and sold in Greater Minnesota, which is a vast change from just a decade ago. I'd also like to note, just briefly, administration fees in some state programs need to change, in our opinion, to ensure that administrative costs are covering the true cost of our work. Some examples of that are the Small Cities Development Program and the Publicly Owned Housing Program grant funds. On a positive note, we recently administered the COVID Housing Assistance Program through Minnesota Housing these past 6 months. We're very grateful to the state for allowing administrative expenses to be reimbursed up to 20% of the grant funds. Our organization did not need to meet that max, but we did need to request up to 17%. We support this type of flexibility and would like to see it expanded in other state grants. In closing, our partnership supports new policy or creative funding approaches in this session. We support the Homes for All legislative agenda, including creating and preserving more homes, providing shelter and support, advancing ownership and wealth building, protecting rights and advancing equity, as well as modifications to the workforce housing grant that I'll speak on a little bit later in this hearing. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to answering any of your questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Worth, do we have questions?
Yes, Madam Chair, Representative Howard has a question.
Representative Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Mr. Adams. Both Mr. McMahon and Mr. Adams kind of spoke to the gap in terms of financial viability for development in Greater Minnesota. And I have just a question kind of about the size of that gap. Is it fair to say that resources are needed to help close those gaps, that, policy changes in and of themselves probably, are more sort of a tinkering around the edges versus an investment and sort of all of the above kind of needed to make some of this development go in Greater Minnesota?
Mr. Adams.
Yeah, Mr. Howard, I see it as all the above. It's certainly the substantial gap in single-family home ownership, just as one example. We need tens of thousands of dollars of assistance from a community. It can come in many different forms, but in the past, it used to be maybe in the lower tens of thousands of dollars. Now it's substantial beyond that, just based on the construction costs. I think there are policy changes as well, too, that we would support. And I'll speak a little bit to that with the Workforce Housing Grant Program a little bit later, and some of the barriers that we're seeing there as well, too. But certainly support all policy and funding approach.
Follow up, Representative Howard.
Just a quick comment, Madam Chair. And I know it seems like sometimes we get into this either or mindset when it comes to housing policy or looking at administrative fees and building fees and that. And I just wanted to call attention that we should look at those things, yes, but it just seems to me there's no way for us to truly address our housing challenges in greater Minnesota or across the state without investment at the state level. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Mr. Worth, any others?
Madam Chair, no questions at this time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adams. And now we have a presentation from the Minnesota Coalition for the Homeless. We have two testifiers. I believe Rhonda Otteson is going first. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. My name is Rhonda Otteson, Executive Director.
Right now, we need a little more volume, I think.
All right. Is that better?
No, not really.
Can you hear me better now?
Well, members, are you all okay with that volume? We'll give it a whirl.
All right. Well, my name is Rhonda Otteson, Executive Director of the Minnesota Coalition for the Homeless, and we are a statewide advocacy organization comprised of about 100 member organizations. As a statewide coalition, we work to generate policies, community support, and local resources for housing and services to end homelessness in Minnesota. Today, I'll share key information about homelessness in Greater Minnesota, in regional centers, in small towns, and rural areas. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Many people may not think that homelessness exists in Greater Minnesota because it's less visible and concentrated. But that simply isn't the case. Homelessness isn't just a metro issue, it's a Minnesota issue. Here is just a basic overview of homelessness in Minnesota. On any given night, there are about 20,000 children, adults, and seniors experiencing homelessness in Minnesota. About a third of the homeless population in Minnesota lives in Greater Minnesota, and these numbers are increasing. Children and youth comprise about half of the homeless population in Greater Minnesota. We have deep racial disparities in Minnesota, and homelessness is no exception. Homelessness disproportionately impacts communities of color and Indigenous populations who are 10 times more likely to experience homelessness than white Minnesotans. We are trending in the wrong direction. Between 2015 and 2018, homelessness increased by 13% in Greater Minnesota, and unsheltered homelessness in Greater Minnesota increased by over a third. The needs across our state are great. For individuals and families, 80 of 87 counties lack enough shelter beds to meet the need. In Greater Minnesota, the average length of stay in shelter is about 45 days. People are waiting an average of 12 months to get into stable housing from homelessness. And Minnesota has a significant shortage of housing, as many of the other speakers have mentioned. We currently lack about 53,000 units of housing, and we need an additional 300,000 units of housing by 2030. Shelters are a critical piece of our community response to homelessness. Shelter options in Greater Minnesota vary based on the needs of the local community. Two primary models that are used are local motels to provide shelter and physical shelter models that range in size from duplexes to converted motels or congregate shelters. For example, in International Falls, Servants of Shelter provides emergency shelter in a duplex. Oasis in Little Falls currently uses a local motel to provide shelter, but wants to purchase an unused medical facility. It's well established that Minnesota has a significant housing supply shortage, and we lack the shelter capacity to bring children, families, and adults inside while they wait for a permanent home. Until we're able to build enough housing to meet the needs of our state, shelter is a life-saving option for communities across the state. This session, I'd like to highlight two of our key priorities around homelessness. First, we need to invest in the expansion and preservation of emergency shelter beds to provide immediate and temporary housing for our most vulnerable Minnesotans. Emergency shelter beds generate a short-term solution for individuals and families sleeping outside. A pool of flexible funds to preserve and create shelter options in Greater Minnesota will allow communities to create the models that best meet their local needs. In Greater Minnesota, there are about $10 million in identified shelter projects that could create about 1,000 beds or preserve them. They simply lack the money to move those projects forward. Second, shelters need increased operating funding. The base funding of the Emergency Services Program, which empowers communities across the state to find creative and flexible solutions, is deeply underfunded. The program is essential in Greater Minnesota since the ESP program funds shelter operation costs and motel stays where physical shelter infrastructure doesn't exist. Winter is upon us. With a lack of safe shelter beds across the state, individuals and families are forced to make life-saving decisions about how they will stay safe and warm on cold nights, amidst the reality that their choice must also protect them and their families from a deadly virus. We know shelter saves lives and housing ends homelessness. We need investments in both to solve this crisis. As we move through the 2021 legislative session, please prioritize shelter, services, and housing to address the homelessness crisis so every Minnesotan has a safe and dignified home. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll take the second testifier before we go to questions, and that is Amber Holmstrom from West Central Minnesota Communities Action. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself for the record.
Good morning, Chair Hausman and committee members. Thank you for having me here today and listening to my testimony. My name is Amber Holmstrom. I'm the housing coordinator for West Central Minnesota Communities Action in rural Minnesota. Our agency manages several programs ranging from energy assistance, Head Start, MNsure, along with many different rental assistance and emergency shelter programs. Homelessness in rural Minnesota looks different than in metro areas. We cover the 5 counties of Douglas, Grant, Pope, Stevens, and Traverse. Within all of these counties, we do not have an actual homeless shelter. The nearest one is a minimum of 60 miles away, whether it be in St. Cloud or Moorhead. These shelters are often always at max capacity, and if there is an opening, transportation becomes the next barrier for our clients. Homelessness in our area is unique, and those we serve are resourceful, but that doesn't mean that it is okay and most definitely does not make the issue go away. Many turn a blind eye as they don't see homelessness as one can in a metro area. We do not have homeless camps, and although it's not rare, we do not see individuals standing on corners daily. Homelessness within our area consists of households sleeping in their vehicles, in fish houses, RVs, and campers without water and electricity, and in warmer months in tents and wooded areas. When too many bridges haven't been burnt, they will couch hop with family and friends, and even those they don't know. When they have not already utilized our program, they can get a warm hotel room for a few nights or utilize our ESP program if we have openings. These households consist of adults, youth, children, vets, along with those suffering from mental illness and addiction. They have families, jobs, and their children are enrolled in our schools. Last year, our agency served 128 households with emergency housing, 44 homeless families secured housing with FHPAP funds, and served almost 100 households on various rental assistance programs. On average, we are not able to assist over half of the rental applications we receive, more so this year due to COVID-19. We do not want someone staying in a toxic relationship because there aren't any ways out for them, or our children's classmates missing day after day of school because they don't have an address for the school bus to pick them up at. We do not want someone dying because they are trying to sleep outside on nights like last night. No one wants to be homeless. Without the appropriate resources and staffing, most of these people don't stand a chance at succeeding. I hear so often, if they would just get a job, they could afford somewhere to live, or I'll drop them off a job application that'll solve their problem right away. Yes, the job will help allow someone to pay for their own housing, but how do they go to work when they can't shower? When the only clothes that they are wearing are the only ones that they have? What if you have nowhere to sleep? We all know that a productive day at work is better had on a good night's sleep. What if, and that doesn't even go into the issue of the affordable housing shortage and lack of barrier-free housing. I could go on for hours. We focus on a housing first model within our agency, and we have seen such a much higher success rate in all aspects of our clients since we started that model. Our agency has assisted those we serve overcome so many different obstacles. In small town rural Minnesota, we have assisted those escaping sex trafficking. Although most would think something such as this does not happen in our small communities, it certainly does, and it's becoming a growing issue. Alexandria is a central stop between the Twin Cities and Moorhead. Our agency works very closely with our local Someplace Safe, an agency that provides services to victims and survivors of crime. With our partnership with Someplace Safe, we assisted a woman escape trafficking and addiction after she found out she was pregnant at a very young age. She did not have a strong support system, and we were able to provide her with temporary shelter and then place her on an ongoing rental assistance program. Her son is now just over a year old, and she has been sober since she was 2 months pregnant and stably housed. Although she will have struggles for the rest of her life, our programs assisted her gain independence, sobriety, much needed resources, and a place to call home for her and her son. Our programming assists people of all walks of life. One of my first clients was an older vet. He came to our office after hearing about our programs, hoping we could find some form of an option for him. This man had served our country and had been living in the basement of a church for almost 7 years. He had several mental and physical health issues. He had lost his driver's license due to health issues, had no support system except the pastor of the church, and was simply giving up on life. We were able to place him on our long-term homeless program, provide him with a 5-year housing voucher, and located him a small efficiency apartment. We assisted with transportation, including rides in our agency vehicle and bus passes. He began getting connected with several doctors, along with seeking mental and physical health services. He eventually was able to apply for Social Security, and after a 2-year fight, he finally received it. 6 years later, this gentleman now has his driver's license, has his health issues controlled, was able to move into a larger subsidized unit, volunteers for several agency programs such as volunteer driver programs and food drops, and is an extremely active member of our agency, including being the vice chair on my FHPAP More Than Shelter board and my consumer advisory board. Our ESP program, Launchpad, assisted a woman who was 60 years of age who lost her housing and her hours were cut at her place of employment. She had burned bridges staying with the small amount of family and friends she has. Affordable housing within our community is already very hard to find, and even more so with the pandemic. Most subsidized units in Alexandria are at minimum a 2-year wait list. She resorted to living out of her vehicle. Her employer was made aware of the situation, made a referral to our agency, and Launchpad was able to provide her with a place to stay to save money for a new place to call home. Launchpad for us consists of 2 duplex units that are fully furnished and at no cost to the households we serve. Everything is provided down to the cleaning supplies and personal needs items. We have partnered with local churches that provide hot and frozen meals to our household upon entering the program, and our food shelf provides them with food to fill the cupboards. The average time a client is on this program at this point for us is roughly 45 days. All but one of our households has moved on to some form of subsidized housing through referrals and assistance from our staff. It's stories like this that we see and hear every day. We have never gone a single day without having a household to fill our Launchpad units, which is sad but the raw truth. If we were able to receive more funding and consistent funding for emergency shelter and rental assistance programs, we would have so many more success stories and hopefully will make homelessness rare and brief. Our largest problem is not having enough housing services, especially emergency type housing. Until we solve this problem, we will never put an end to homelessness. Emergency housing doesn't always have to be a shelter. As I mentioned above, we have other options for households we serve. We just simply do not have enough. Shelter saves lives, housing ends homelessness. I want to thank you all for your time today and giving me the time to speak. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer.
Thank you very much. Members, if there are questions for either Ms. Otteson or Ms. Holmstrom, Mr. Worth, do we have questions?
Madam Chair, there are no questions at this time.
Thank you very much for your testimony. And now we have House File 619, a bill authored by Representative Urdahl. Representative Urdahl, welcome to the committee. To get the bill before us, I will move House File 619, and this bill will be laid over for possible inclusion. And Representative Urdahl, there's an author's amendment. Would you like to adopt the amendment before you proceed to describe the bill, or how would you like to?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Let's do the amendment first.
Okay, so I will further move the author's amendment, the A1 amendment, and we're obligated, I think, to officially take the roll, even though it's non-controversial. Mr. Wilcox.
Hausman,
Aye.
Howard,
Aye.
Tice,
Aye.
Agbaje,
Aye.
Bliss,
Aye.
Gomez,
Aye.
Hassan, Hassan, Heinrich,
Aye.
Hur,
Aye.
Jurgens,
Aye.
Olson, excused, Barr,
Aye.
and Ryer.
Aye.
Madam Chair, that is 11 ayes and 2 excused.
With 11 ayes and 2 excused, that amendment is adopted. And now Representative Urdahl, to your bill as amended.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. House File 619 is a bill to provide funding for the Workforce Housing Grant Program. It provides $6 million for the Workforce Housing Grant Program for the 2022-23 biennium. This is a $2 million increase over the program's base appropriation and is equal to the recommendation included in Governor Walz's budget. It increases the maximum grant from 25% of the project cost to 50% of the project cost. Often when a workforce housing grant is added into the financing of a project, the increased cost required to meet the requirements of the grant can be equal or more than the total grant amount. And that's why we have this. In answering Representative Gomez's question, these are multifamily units and are intended for rental. They are a bridge for entry-level positions, people who are just starting out and not ready to buy a home yet, but need a place to live. And going back to some comments, I'll expound a little bit more on what Mr. McMahon was saying of the importance of housing in greater Minnesota and of course across the whole state. But it's very difficult to get people to come out to work in greater Minnesota. And I know Chair Hausman has heard me say this before, if they have no place to live and no one to take care of their children. Too often when housing is not available for our workforce, our employers cannot recruit and hire the employees that they need to address their business needs. Now, in a town that, well, my hometown of Litchfield, we have a situation right now where a major company is expanding, and they'll have 1,000 to 2,000 more workers in their place of employment. And we have in Litchfield, and these are maybe a little old figures is from last year, there were 12 places to rent in Litchfield. So there's basically a large business expanding, a lot more workers coming in, and literally no place for them to live in Litchfield. Now, we have been exploring other options there, and as has been indicated, this is not the only thing, but this bill is an important option for communities that need this type of help, with, of course, the knowledge that other options have to be explored as well. So I guess I appreciate the support of this bill. Certainly appreciate the hearing from Representative Hausman. She and I have worked over the years on housing, affordable housing, and bonding bills is certainly a very important tool that we have to do just as much as we can. So with that, I appreciate your support and any questions you have.
Representative Gomez, did those comments get at your earlier question, or did you want to still follow up?
Yeah, they did. Can I ask a quick other question, Madam Chair? Or would you like me to wait?
No, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much, Representative Urdahl, for this effort. I think this is really important, and I appreciate all the information that the testifiers provided about the kind of, to really help us understand how much housing supply and affordability impact every single community across Minnesota. And so I know we're going to need to continue to kind of beat that drum, because there is this sort of mistaken impression that it's just an issue that impacts the urban core. You mentioned that so you're adding 2 million above the base, and that the sort of threshold for support would be moved from 25 to 50% of some kind of cost. And so I'm just wondering if will this increase in the program like result in new units being supported beyond what we're doing right now, or will it impact the affordability of the units that we're kind of currently building or are currently in the pipeline? If that makes sense.
Representative Urdahl?
Yeah, I guess I'm not exactly sure what's implied with the question there. And this is intended to add to do more. And perhaps what we should do, Chair Hausman, is have the other testifiers testify and then go to questions. All of us.
That we will do that. So we have 3 testifiers. You've heard from 2 of them earlier. Mr. McMahon, welcome back.
Thank you, Chair Hausman and committee members. Again, my name is Scott McMahon here on behalf of the Greater Minnesota Partnership and the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities. First off, I want to thank you for hearing this bill. This is precisely the kind of program that I spoke about in my earlier testimony as having the appropriate impact in our communities. If you were to ask our communities and developers that are doing projects, you will hear them tell you that, frankly, this is one of the most successful and powerful programs that we have. There are challenges with it that this bill works to address, but it is doing what it's intended to do. I do want to appreciate the consideration of Representative Urdahl and others to add funds into this program. The reality is we could have 10 times more money in this program and find qualifying projects to make the investments that have big impacts. So, I understand the challenges across the spectrum that we face with this committee and funding decisions need to be had. But just know that the ROI on this particular program is tremendous. The issue that we do face with it and what Representative Urdahl is trying to accomplish with that 25% to 50% is once this funding comes into play in the overall funding portfolio, we have additional costs that come into the equation. And all too often, those increased costs exceed what the grant amount is for. And so once you have that situation, communities and developers just don't see this as a viable tool for them, even though the intended purpose for it is completely in line with what they're trying to do. And so our hope is that by increasing the funding in the program and adjusting that 25% per project grant maximum to 50%, that what we can do is get the program available to more communities, make it more attractive, and empower it to do what all of us are looking to do with it. So I think, hopefully Representative Gomez, that answers your questions. But again, we highly support this proposal. We know it'll have a big impact on the challenges that we face, and it'll do what it's intended to do. So with that, happy to answer any questions that folks have.
And we'll take the other 2 testifiers and then we'll go to questions. Mr. Adams is back again also. Welcome back.
Madam Chair Hausman, thank you again. Chad Adams, CEO of the Southwest Minnesota Housing Partnership. I'd just like to offer that there is extraordinary demand for this grant and rental housing in just about every community I talk to across 30 counties in the Southwest and South Central Minnesota. And they're calling us on a regular basis. We don't even have to reach out to them to talk about this grant program because there's that much need. The cost of building homes and apartments, both pre and during the pandemic, have increased so much in the last 10 years that it's virtually impossible to build quality, safe, stable rental apartments that are financially feasible, even with substantial community support, which we've been seeing more and more of over the years in the form of tax incentives, infrastructure, and or free lots that are paired with this grant. We're unable to build an own product and charge the rents that are needed to cash flow the projects long-term in Greater Minnesota. We've also talked to several cities, EDAs, and HRAs who are interested in building workforce rental housing on their own, but are hesitant because they prefer that the private market or nonprofit developers such as us continue to take that lead on the development and management of properties. And while cities, EDAs, and HRAs may have some advantage to build and own some of that housing, they often don't have the expertise to manage and maintain the properties. And we can't, as a partnership with a conscious mind, advise the public entities to move forward in that direction based on the pro forma financial feasibilities that we provide for such product, as there will be long-term financial sustainability issues if they pursue this route. That's why the partnership and reform to existing programs and policies continues to be the best path forward for nonprofits such as us to meet the extraordinary housing challenges in Greater Minnesota, specifically with workforce rental housing. I've also had the experience of writing and assisting with 2 grant applications for this specific program in the last 5 years, and the program needs some changes, particularly to the funding threshold of currently up to 25% of the state grant for the project total development cost. Our partnership has experienced that up to the 25% grant is not sufficient to support the financial cash flow of workforce housing apartments in Greater Minnesota, in part due to the construction costs and inability to charge the rents again needed in Greater Minnesota to positively cash flow those projects. And while the partnership is a strong supporter of living wages, we've experienced that the 25% grant and required match from the city most oftentimes does not cover the increased cost from the state's prevailing wage requirements for the grant. We've heard frequently from cities that they are not interested in pursuing this great grant program if the grant doesn't cover those increased costs from prevailing wages, unfortunately. And because of all these variables, we support the changes in the bill before you today, authorized by Representative Urdahl. And to Representative Gomez's question, will the additional funding create more units? In our experience in working on the financial performance and feasibility of these projects, not every project will need up to 50% of the grant. Some will between 35, 45%. So I really do believe that will increase the amount of housing units that will be constructed in Greater Minnesota. Thank you for the opportunity to speak and look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you. Okay, and now we have Todd Peterson, who is from the City of Roseville, Community Development Coordinator, City of Roseville. Then we'll go to questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair Hausman and committee members. I'm pleased to have an opportunity to speak on this bill. Workforce housing is a huge issue for communities like Roseville. We have a desperate need to grow to keep up with our local manufacturers, and we just don't have housing. We have 0% vacancy. It's a chronic problem. We've had this problem the entire time I have been working for Roseville, which is nearly 25 years now. And it's a function of the market not being able to work, as was mentioned by Chad and others. The rents that we can charge in rural communities does not cash flow the high costs of production anymore. And while we do have good paying jobs, we have lots of them available, we just don't have the housing to house those people we need to bring in to work at these jobs. We've tapped out our labor force, and without additional housing, we just can't move forward. And so we are very supportive. We were one of the pilots of this workforce housing program when it was created, I think about 10 years ago. So we've had that experience that this is the only housing that we've had built in the last 25 years, was with this workforce housing funds. Without subsidy, that just will not be built. And some of the issues we run into, we currently have an application in for workforce housing grant. Unfortunately, there's only $1.5 million available for the current round. There were 8 applications. We know that they won't all get funded. And we are looking at our project. We would like to add 37 units. And we have a construction cost of about $5.7 million for those 37 units, with about a $2 million appraisal gap. Right now, the city is going to come up with about $1.5 million in subsidy, our own owner equity, and other tax incentives to match the state grant of $500,000 that we hope to get. But that just isn't enough, and we just don't have the resources to be able to put that much forward on every project. So once we do this project, we just won't have the resources to do another project when we need more units, which we will need soon. And so that's where we believe there just needs to be more resources put towards this program, and that some of the challenges that we've had with the prevailing wage issue, that if we ask for a grant under prevailing wage at $500,000, that is helpful. If we ask for $1 more than that and prevailing wage kicks in, we automatically increase the cost of the project by $500,000, which means we need to ask for at least $1 million just to be at the same spot we were at $500,000 once prevailing wage kicks in. So that's the difficulty in making these dollars go far enough to get enough units added in rural Minnesota, where this is really an issue. So I am very supportive of the efforts by Representative Urdahl to increase some of the funding to the program overall, and to change some of the match requirements for local communities like us that we're doing whatever we can to add housing, but it's just really an uphill battle for us to get it in place. And thank you for your time. And
thank you. Thank you for your testimony. And so now, members, do we have questions for the author or the testifiers? Mr. Worth, are there questions?
Madam Chair, there are no questions at this time.
Representative Urdahl.
Madam Chair,
Oh.
Representative Gomez has a question.
Representative Gomez.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. My question kind of about that capacity was answered. So thank you so much for that, Mr. Adams. I guess I'm wondering, I think that Mr. McMahon kind of referred to this, but do we have a good sense of like what the need is across Greater Minnesota? You know, like if we were to fund this program at a level that actually met the need for housing in our communities across the state, what funding level would we be looking at? Or maybe we don't know, but if anybody has an idea.
Mr. McMahon or Mr. Adams, who has?
You know, Chair Hausman, I haven't seen a number as to what the actual need is. The challenge we have, as Mr. Adams had alluded to, is that often communities that would apply for this grant based off of what they need in their community don't, because they know that because of economic situations, it's not going to happen. And so, you know, if you think about the number of cities that we have across Greater Minnesota, we can do these projects in most every city that we have out there. And so, I mean, that'll give you a sense of the scale that we're dealing with here. And so, you know, I would challenge you that that every dollar that you can put in this program, we can find an effective way to spend it with a high ROI for the state.
And I think that's probably true of every line in the budget, that even though Representative Urdahl with his amendment increased the amount, the point is it is not enough for the challenge because it is growing. What is it? The increase in Greater Minnesota is 13%, a 13% increase in the problem. So probably it's an understatement to say we could do more. Other questions, Mr. Worth?
Well, Madam Chair, Mr. Adams had would like.
Oh, Mr. Adams.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'd just like to add that if this grant program were available tomorrow, we'd probably see dozens of communities applying for it right away. And that's just based on the conversations I've had without marketing the program. I know it would be much larger than that. So there's a lot of funding that could go into this program that would have a major, significant impact. I'm very confident of that.
Further questions, Mr. Worth?
Madam Chair, Representative Tice has a question.
Representative Tice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to thank Representative Urdahl for bringing this forward because I think it's a big problem in a lot of different communities. I've just been doing a little digging around here, and Roseville's population, and please correct me, Mr. Peterson, if I'm wrong, but when I look at just Googling it, I'm looking at about 3,000 folks. And I'm thinking you've got some pretty big industries there. And I know part of getting people to come up to Roseau in the first place is having them just come up there and see the way of life. And that's why their needs are just that, how do I get people up here? So you need multifamily. And then once you got them, then we need to have that market housing that they are looking for. And it is really hard to build. And so this is such a multifaceted issue because I keep saying we got to figure out what we're doing with the cost of housing. And there's many things I see, you know, in some of the bills coming through that just make me go, we're just not helping housing at all. So I really appreciate Representative Urdahl's bringing this forward because I look at St. Cloud is really close to Cold Spring. And Cold Spring has a population of about 4,200 folks. But they have, well, it used to be Golden Plump, now it's Pilgrim. And they also have Cold Spring, the granite company, which employs a whole bunch of people. But one of the issues they're having with growing and needing workforce is also transportation because they don't have the housing for folks to live in the community. So they're coming to St. Cloud and then they don't have the transportation going back and forth. And I know Metro Bus is trying to find some ways to do it, but it's just really hard for them to figure out how to do it cost effectively. So we're looking at so many different factors in why this bill is so important because we need it. We just absolutely need it. St. Cloud is always looking, and I think we've got a little bit of a push now on multifamily, but getting that market value home for these folks to move in after they decide they want to stay in the area and have that first home. I mean, it's 260 grand, and that's kind of across the board for a entry level, which I would call entry level. A split level, bi-level home is ridiculous. I mean, we used to build them for just a tad over, 100 grand when my husband and I first got into building. But I also look at, the building prices have substantially gone up. Typically, when the interest rates are low, materials are a little bit higher, but they are not just a little bit higher right now. They are very higher. And we found that out just doing a little bit of remodeling in our home, when just buying base shoe was it just blew us away how much that had gone up. And that's just a little thing, but 2x4s and everything else has gone up as well. So we need to really, really help our folks find what they need in order to bring the housing they need for the people they need. I know we've heard across the board. I heard from somebody just recently in southern Minnesota, they want to expand their business and add 500 jobs. They don't have any housing. They can't find people to come and work. And we're going to see that across the board, especially as we're trying to recover. We're just not seeing the people. And it has so much to do with housing. So I really thank you again, Representative Urdahl. And please, Mr. Peterson, give a high five to Mayor Fabian for me. You've got a good guy. Yeah, you got a good guy sitting with you, and he's been talking about this for a long time. So we need to really, I know Representative Keel has done the same. And I guess my question to you, Representative Urdahl, is there a place for manufactured housing in this as well?
Representative Urdahl.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure. I don't think there is, but if someone can correct me, they can.
Mr. Worth, do we have other questions?
Madam Chair, no other questions at this time.
Okay, Representative Urdahl, final comments to your bill.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate again the hearing. This doesn't solve the problem, but it makes some steps in the right direction. We need to be doing this. We need, as they said earlier, to be doing more for affordable housing. Whatever we can do for housing in Greater Minnesota and in the entire state, we need to do. So thank you.
Representative Urdahl, I learned a couple of days ago one reason why people are drawn to Litchfield, and that is apparently you have the best donut shop in the state.
Well, we have a lot of good things in Litchfield.
Well, thank you very much.
I thought it was so they could. I thought it was so they, as they come to Litchfield, they could go through Darwin and see the biggest ball of twine made by one man.
That too. So this House File 619, as amended, will be laid over for a possible inclusion in our budget bill. Thank you, Representative Urdahl.
Thank you.
We have one more bill, House File 616, Representative Fischer. I will move House File 616 to get it before us, and this also will be laid over for possible inclusion. Welcome to the committee, Representative Fischer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the committee for being able to present House File 616. This is a bill that would provide grants to increase lead testing and to make residential rental units safe that test high in lead. It would provide assistance to landlords of buildings that are 11 units or smaller, where income is below 60% in most of the units, or to landlords that have got buildings of 12 or more units, which have an average tenant income of 50% below the medium income or less. It would provide for $1 million for the year 2022 and $1 million for the year 2023. And that's the bill in a nutshell. What I'd like to do is turn it over to my testifiers who've got some very compelling stories as to why this bill is needed.
And I think they are all from MICA, the Metropolitan Interfaith Council on Affordable Housing. Is Tisha Fletcher going first?
Madam Chair, this is Sue Watlow Phillips from MICA. Tycia Fletcher is going to be on video, and Justin is going to cue that up for us right now. She experienced homelessness, and both her children were poisoned by lead, and so she's going to tell her story via video.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tycia Fletcher, and I was residing in South Minneapolis when my children were poisoned by lead in 2010. My son was 10 months old, and he had to go to his normal well check. And when we went out to get his normal check, we discovered that he was poisoned. They test kids at the 10th month. And from there, my daughter had to be tested as well because she was living in the same household. And both children were poisoned. And today my son is mentally disabled and diagnosed with autism. So we participated in a window replacement program through Sustainable Resource Center. And once we had all of the windows replaced in the unit, because we income qualified, we were evicted. The landlord found some reason to evict us, and we had to move out of our South Side apartment to North Minneapolis. And this was in 2011. In May of 2011, North Minneapolis was hit with a tornado. My family was greatly impacted. We lost everything that we had, and this was the first time I became homeless. I had never experienced homelessness. I didn't know homeless people, but this was something that I did experience, and I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. So my family and I ended up in a Red Cross shelter, and this is when I met Elam Transitional Housing, and I also met the executive director of Elam in my pajamas. It was midnight, and this lady was still out working, helping families with questions and resources on finding new placement for themselves and their families. So during that time, I was offered a job with Elam Transitional Housing as a rapid exit worker, finding housing for homeless people. Again, I never knew anything about homelessness or its process, and it was by the grace of God that I was able to house about 30 families during that time in the shelter and during the tornado. So after working for Elam, I joined MICA, and I was a housing advocate there. And then we began to work on a land safety bill called the Dustin Luke Shields Act, which is my son's first and last name. And we have worked with a number of legislators. Karen Clark was the author of, Representative Clark was the author in the House, and Senator John Hoffman was the author in the Senate. Micah has helped me a lot with my organization, with legislation, and finding housing. Because being an employer of Micah, I had the opportunity to meet legislators I had never met. I never thought about going into the Capitol, didn't know how to do a 2-minute elevator speech. I've learned so many wonderful, great tools to help me not only get the Dustin Luke Shields Act passed, but how to develop a bill and how to get it started and how to get it passed. So if you're looking for an organization to teach you all these things, Micah is the best place for you to go.
With your support today and a commitment to support on an ongoing basis.
Madam Chair.
Ms. Phillips, please extend to Ms. Fletcher our gratitude for her sharing her story through the video.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, Representative Clark was the original author on the bill. Obviously, Representative Fischer is the author now. I'd like to turn it over to Rochelle to talk a little bit about sustainable resources and the work there, and then I'll come back and finish up the testimony.
Thank you. Rochelle Paleska, welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself for the record.
Thank you, and good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. My name is Rochelle Manitow-Paleska, and I'm the Director of Education Outreach Program at Sustainable Resources Center, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to advancing the cause of healthy homes. I'm happy to testify in support of Lead Safe Homes Bill because it will provide a vital lead disclosure information to families and communities that will keep them healthy and safe. I met Tycia and her son many years ago when she came to SRC for our help. Through our lead education outreach program, we offer free in-home visits to identify lead hazards. We collect dust swipe samples and assist families in the enrollment process for lead hazard reduction grants that are provided through Hennepin County, City of Minneapolis, and the Department of Health. These grants are primarily federal resources that are available to low-income families to replace windows and painting of other surfaces such as doors and trims and exterior components. I'd like to share a few slides with you. Is everyone able to see this?
No,
Not yet.
Not yet.
Apologize.
There you go.
It's coming.
There it comes, Rochelle.
All right, thank you. So the first slide is examples of lead, and this is a little drastic, but we do see a lot of this chipping and peeling paint, especially in high friction surfaces like the windows and the doors. The next slide, everyone can see that. How does lead enter the body? And it is a neurotoxin and has many harmful effects on children's intelligence and behavior and growth. Anyone living in a home built before 1978 may be at risk. However, children under the age of 6 years old are most vulnerable. And the biggest problem that we see is that most families are not aware of the lead issue or where the sources come from or in the harmful effects of lead poisoning. So in addition to the permanent learning disabilities and aggressive behavior and stunted growth that the child suffers, there are also social and economic consequences that impact a child's future. The estimated cost associated for a lead poisoned child is about $100,000 a year versus spending an approximate of $2,500 per apartment unit on lead reduction, such as paint stabilization and cleaning up with HEPA vacs. So it only makes sense that when we invest our money, we should invest it in preventative measures where we can save lives, save money, and protect our children from their future. Here's a slide of the red zones here local in Minneapolis, where we have a lot of older homes built before 1978. You can see North and South Minneapolis are the biggest at risk. During my 13 years at Sustainable Resources Center, I've seen many children suffering from the devastating effects of lead poisoning. I've worked with families who live in apartment complexes or single family homes and where children were poisoned in multiple of those complex apartments. Parents were heartbroken, and had they known that their home or apartments had lead hazards, they would never live there or moved in there in the first place. The next slide is how we can tell. The only way to tell that a child has been exposed to lead is through lead testing. You can see us in the picture of a nurse doing a simple capillary finger poke. We do this inside our Lead Yeti van, which we offer free lead services throughout the state of Minnesota. And we get results to the parents within 3 minutes. Unfortunately, because of COVID this past year and this year as well, lead testing has drastically declined, and all of our events for lead testing have been canceled. So it's really detrimental that the children who are living in this safe environment, they're still at great risk. Here we have a slide regarding our window replacement grant program. And again, like I mentioned, we offer free in-home visits and assist families in enrolling into these grants. And it is available to renters, homeowners, and landlords. The requirements are there, but you can see the drastic picture before and after. So there's a lot of things that in life that are out of our control, but lead poisoning is not one of these. It is 100% preventable. And we have this opportunity to do something about it, to keep our children and families safe from lead. So hopefully when given this opportunity, I hope you agree with me and support this bill. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. And now on to Ms. Phillips, I believe.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members, and I want to thank Representative Fischer again for reintroducing this bill, the Lead Safe Home Bills, also known as the Dustin Luke Shields Bill, named after Tycia's son, House File 616. Again, I'm Sue Watlow Phillips. I'm the Executive Director of MICA, the Metropolitan Interfaith Council on Affordable Housing, and also President of the National Coalition for the Homeless. I also was that Executive Director that Tycia met in 2011 in the North Minneapolis Red Cross shelter when she was in her jammies, as we were trying to help people get rehoused after that tornado. And I've worked with people experiencing homelessness for over 53 years across the state as well as across the country. This bill is supported by MICA, Homes for All, and JRLC, the Joint Religious Legislative Coalition. MICA is an interfaith organization. We live our faith and values by being a welcoming community where we treat and love others as ourselves. This is a personal issue for our board members. We have 2 board members' families that have been personally impacted by lead poisoning. One board member was poisoned as a child, and he still has reading and learning disabilities because of that. And then one of our members, both their children were poisoned by lead. Both of those folks have experienced homelessness themselves. Our members from MICA are directly involved in addressing the immediate needs of people in our community as we work together with people experiencing homelessness and housing crisis to address and end the systemic causes of homelessness, the housing crisis, and racism, so that everyone, without exception, has a safe, decent, accessible home, rental or home ownership affordable to them. I'm going to have Justin put up a map of Minnesota, and you also received this with these different slides as a part of the presentation that you have as far as different documents. This is not just an urban issue. You can see in this map that we have units across the state of Minnesota that were built before 1980. So anything that was built in 1978 and before probably has lead paint in it. It may be encapsulated or it may not be. A lot of units have not been abated where it's been totally taken out. So right now in Minnesota, we estimate that there's about 1 million units of housing that have lead paint in them and about 359,000 renter occupied units that potentially have lead in them. So we have people living in units right now that their children or their visitors that have children are at risk of lead paint poisoning. I'm going to have Justin now turn over to our flyer that we use for this, which is our Lead Safe Home poster. What we see is that at least 700 children are poisoned by lead each year in Minnesota. And this is primarily our diverse communities living in poverty and typically living in some of these older affordable units. As Rochelle said, because of the COVID-19, we've really had a significant reduction in lead testing, lead poisoning testing. And this is a significant concern because obviously a lot of folks have been staying at home more, which means they've had even a higher exposure to lead poisoning. So as we move forward with the COVID-19 vaccination of not only adults, but eventually children, we are hopeful that we can also do some lead testing when we are vaccinating the children. And we've had those conversations with the Department of Health. Being poisoned by lead may damage a child's brain, as Rochelle said, and the ability to be all that God created them to be. I watched Tycia's son, Dustin, grow up, so I've known them for the last 12 years. He has struggled with communicating, interacting, getting along with others, acting out, all caused by becoming disabled from lead paint. His family has struggled as they work to meet his needs. All of this was preventable. None of us want our children or grandchildren or nieces or nephews or great nieces and nephews, in my case, to live in unsafe housing and be poisoned by lead. As people of faith, we want to make sure that our children have the opportunity to be all that God created them to be and for our families to thrive. As Rochelle mentioned, it costs us only about $2,500 per unit to do the testing and to make a unit safe by encapsulating the paint. Basically, it's painting over the old paint, and that will keep it safe for 5 years. This bill targets diverse communities in an urban area and a rural area where there is a high rate of lead paint poisoning. Landlords would first have to use other state and federal fund programs before they would be able to use these dollars. But we know that very small landlords, and I am a small landlord, I own rental property in Itasca County, live on the edge too, and to struggle to make those basic repairs and provide units that are affordable in the community. So we know that as taxpayers, it costs us a great deal too. For every child that becomes disabled permanently because of lead poisoning, it costs us about $100,000 per year for the rest of their lives. So for Dustin, we've spent about $1.1 million on providing services to him through Medicaid, special ed, personal care assistant, help for the family and respite care. And so as we think about this and as we move forward, if we could keep 10 children from not being permanently disabled by lead, in the first year, we would pay for this bill itself. So as we move together, we hope that we can make all of our homes across Minnesota lead safe for our children. And we ask you to support House File 616. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips, for your work on this and so many other housing programs. Just always, and I think we're going to be together tomorrow morning too.
Yes, ma'am. And we're looking forward to having you speak at our Micah St. Paul breakfast tomorrow morning. Thank you.
Looking forward to that. So do we have questions for our author or testifiers, Mr. Worth?
Yes, Madam Chair. First on the list is Representative Olson.
Representative Olson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the testifiers and for bringing this bill forward, Representative Fischer. This is a big issue in my community, and I know you showed that map, and I'm really glad you did, that this has been something that we talk a lot about here, because in Duluth, we have such old housing stock in the intersections around, race and poverty, and it's just enormous. And so I'm really glad you're bringing this bill forward, and the testimony was powerful, and we hear about it from, what the services children are receiving in schools. I mean, the ripple effect is huge. And I just met with some of the folks working on this issue in Duluth. And I know Chair Fischer knows also about the implications for the lead lines, which is a different topic, but nonetheless, the amount of lead that's going into our kids' bodies, especially in our older communities with older housing stock, is alarming. And it's an equity issue and something we need to deal with. So the bill, I'm so glad it's here. My kind of question is going to be from this. So knowing is great. And that's so awesome. I totally get the testing, and we need to make sure people know and we can do the remediation. But I'm just also struck by the idea that we have to do the remediation, because knowing doesn't work in a community where your only option as a low-income renter is probably going to another place that you're going to have to deal with this. So, I wish we could fund a way bigger project to just do so much more around lead, because this seems like a drop in the bucket. Testing is great, but we kind of know the problem. And we need to really do the remediation part too. So my question was around the way the bill is written. The testing is coupled with, so if there is a positive test in a child or in a rental unit, there has to be the remediation. Is that correct?
Representative Fischer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Olson. The way it was written is that the people administrating the grant would do the testing, and then depending how far the dollars would go, would allow for remediation too. Part of the question that gets in there is you do the testing, do you have that broad enough pool to get every unit hit, et cetera? The hope is that we do, but as you mentioned, we don't, we could use a lot more dollars in the pool than we have. And so it may be one of those, they could find more units needed and they don't have enough in the grant to cover all the units that need to be, that testing shows to be positive lead results on.
Representative Olson. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I apologize. I was going to say, I think one of my testifiers can also address that situation.
Madam Chair, and
Ms. Phillips?
Thank you, Representative Fischer, and thank you, Representative Olson, for the question. So let me just be clear on the testing. So there is the testing that's done of the child by the prick that Rochelle was talking about. That tests to see if the child has an elevated level of lead in their system. Then we have the testing of the actual unit to see if there's lead paint in the unit, and if there is the need then to address the repainting of that unit. So what this bill is specifically doing is it's testing the lead paint in the building to see if that needs to be addressed so that a child does not become lead poisoned. We are targeting it as a program in a specific diverse rural area and diverse in the urban area that has a high concentration of children that are testing positive with that prick that they are being poisoned by lead. And so we're targeting the dollars into our diverse communities so that we're going into those units to try to then prevent any additional children from becoming poisoned.
Representative Olson, follow up.
Thank you. Thank you. That does help clarify, and I fully support what you're doing and whatnot. And I just really hope that, you know, as a legislative body, we have the will to really do what we need to eliminate lead beyond, you know, once we know that there's a problem, which we know, we need to also do what we need to do to help remedy the situation. I hope you come back and keep making that ask of us.
Mr. Worth, other questions?
Yes, Madam Chair. Next is Representative Gomez.
Representative Gomez.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank Representative Fischer also for bringing this forward. It's a really important issue. I just wanted to say a couple of things briefly. Just to clarify, what we have right now, because we have no requirement for landlords to test proactively for the presence of lead in rental units, is that we are literally using children to test for lead. The only time that somebody is required to act is when a child has been poisoned. Like, we need to really consider that. And Ms. Watlove Phillips talked about there's 100,000 of these units across the state of Minnesota. And the, Ms. Rochelle talked about the impacts of lead poisoning. And so, you know, I think it was in like 2011 or something, they cut the actionable level from 10 micrograms per deciliter of lead to 5. But what we know is there is no known level of lead that is safe for children to be exposed to. From what I've read, you see those cognitive impacts at actually much lower levels than like where we take action. And unfortunately, the reason that we set the actionable levels where they are, it's not because of science, it's because of resources and because of policy and because of decisions that people like us are making. And so I guess I just wanted to put that out there because, you know, we have to do better. The impacts of this, you know, toxic substance in babies' bodies is just, it's a lifelong issue, like the testifier talked about. So, you know, for me, I'm really thankful for this, but again, like Rep. Olson said, I mean, this is a drop in the bucket. This is a huge issue, and we really need to get to the point where we're not waiting until a kid is poisoned before we take action, before we require those who are providing housing to take action. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Worth, other questions?
Yes, Madam Chair. Last on the list is Representative Hassan.
You said Representative Hassan?
That's correct.
Representative Hassan.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Sorry, I'm having problems with my computer today. I could hear you guys, but I couldn't, like my audio wasn't working earlier. I want to thank Rep. Fischer for bringing this bill. It's a really important bill. I represent South Minneapolis, part of South Minneapolis, and my district happens to have higher lead, you know, than any other district. I think my district in North Minneapolis is the two parts that have the highest lead poisoning in kids. Like Rep. Aisha Gomez said, I think we're not going far enough. We have to wait until a child gets tested and shows signs of lead poisoning. I have a 15-month-old baby that just got tested 2 weeks ago for lead poisoning. Thankfully, she doesn't have any. But if I have to wait until the child gets tested and then there's signs of lead poisoning in her system or in their system, that's a little too late. So I don't know what we need to do, but I think that this is an equity issue. Many of the young children who are showing up in lead are BIPOC communities, and it's about, you know, equity issue. It's about also, you know, a capital issue. People who have money are not the ones that their children are showing up with lead poisoning. So I think that there has to be another way that we can protect children from not contracting lead poisoning. But I'm very thankful, Representative Fischer, that you're bringing this bill forward, and I wholeheartedly support you. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Fischer, concluding comments on the bill.
Madam Chair, sorry to interrupt. Representative Tice has raised her hand.
Representative Tice.
Madam Chair, Representative Fischer, I just have a question. I mean, it was brought up about testing. Is there, I don't even know how to describe it, but is there a quick test to see if there is paint indeed on the windowsills and such?
Representative Fischer, or is that for Ms. Whitlock Phillips?
I would refer to one of my testifiers on that, Ms. Whitlock.
Madam Chair and Representative, so yes, you at Menards or at Home Depot, you can pick up a test for like about $10. Rochelle is showing you right now, so you can just test very quickly. And if I could just briefly respond to the previous questions, we had a much more aggressive and larger bill several years ago. We have really cut this bill down significantly just to get it to pass. We've been in conference committee twice in the last couple hours before it was pulled in the last few minutes in conference committee. And we thank the incredible support of the chair on this bill. So we'd like to pass this bill this year and then continue to grow and build this bill. We certainly agree with all the comments that you've made. This is one step, but we think it's an important step to then really continue to build on the great work that's already being done by our health department and with our federal dollars. But we do need to target our diverse and new Americans in the communities also, because this is a large part of our population that just does not understand the dangers in these older units.
So I heard you say the test is available at a place like Menards for $10, something like that. Ms. Representative Fischer, concluding comments?
Thank you, Chair Houseman and committee for the opportunity to present this bill. In closing, I want to say this represents an investment. The money that we spend on this program will have large returns down the road, and it starts getting at a large problem while it's reactive. We have to start looking eventually for being more proactive. I appreciate the committee's consideration. Thank you.
And so the House File 616 will be laid over for possible inclusion in our committee budget bill. There being no further business, the next meeting of the Housing, Finance, and Policy Committee will be on Tuesday, February 16th at 10:30. We are adjourned.